travel and all the rest of it. But I'm delighted that you are here. So when Patrick tells me we're a go, then are we a go? Wonderful. So thank you very much for coming out tonight. Virtual audience, thank you. Olivia Fierro is going to be your host tonight. Olivia, thank you so much for coming. And the star of our evening is Lisa Unger, who booked herself with some help into the boulders. So she's had a somewhat long trip down here, and she will have a long trip back. Right, but luckily she has made it, and so we are just. It's a gorgeous place. If you, it's perfect if you weren't actually having to come to Scottsdale to do a book event and you could just stay at the Boulders. It would be great, right? So here we go. Lisa over here. Right. You are welcome. So Lisa has a book with a really fascinating premise, and I'm going to step aside, but I would ask you to think about back when you were younger, or maybe you're doing it now, if you've ever played hide and seek.
Oh, yeah.
And think about what the stakes would have been when you were doing that, especially if you were a child. Rarely was it fatal. Although there are examples of kids who lock themselves in like trunks or old refrigerators or something. But that's not this novel. No, this is right. But anyway, I think it's a fascinating premise. So I'm going to leave them to talk to you about it.
Well, thank you so much. Am I on here?
Are we hot? Yeah.
Got it? All right.
Yep.
Thank you so much. And well, now I'm thinking about going to the Boulders, but I imagine how you felt when you drove right by Hotel Valley Ho, which is also very nice, and it's right there.
Next time, we'll do a little bit more research.
Right. It's like, the Scottsdale area. It's got to be very, very small.
It's I can't remember where I stayed last time. It was another like resorty type place around here too.
We have a lot of them.
Yeah, I tend to just kind of like, because you're just in and out in one day, and so you kind of want to feel like what it is like to be someplace. Because otherwise, it's like it's a flight every morning and it's an event every night for weeks. So you're like, okay, it's Thursday. Where am I? Toledo? Like, you have these kind of moments. So like, I try to pick places that are like, that have a vibe.
Oh, I'm glad you did.
And
we
it
have
does.
Loads of them.
Yes, it does have a vibe. It's just a vibe that's like about an hour away. Yeah.
Yes, it is. Okay, well then, good evening. My name's Olivia Fierro. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you to our friends at the Poison Pen here for inviting me, and I'm so happy to get to talk to you in real life. We've spoken before online, and we're taking our relationship to another level this
IRL.
evening. So I for one am very excited.
Me too.
Welcome to Arizona.
Thank you.
Have you been here? Do you? I know y'all just rolled in from dinner, and so I'm hoping you had a fabulous meal. I want to know what it was.
Yes.
But do you have you been coming to this store for a chunk of your career?
Yeah,
what do you feel about Arizona?
I mean, Arizona is a wonderful place. This is a wonderful store. Barbara is like an iconic bookseller. And this is just this is like one of the special places in the industry for mystery thriller books. I mean, there's a couple of iconic stores. There's Murder by the Book in Houston. There's Mysterious Press in New York City. There's others as well, of course. And this is, Poison Pen. Like, these are the must visit places. So yeah.
And I know a lot of authors will say that they are actually introverts. And, what's interesting about being a successful writer is that you have to be two different kinds of people. The kind of person that is disciplined and can thrive in the quiet and write all alone. And then also the kind of person that can magically switch into somebody else and go around to lots of strange cities all over the country, potentially the world, and sell your book and meet with strangers.
Yeah.
So
It's true.
how do we balance that transition?
Well, that's a really good question because it is true. I am actually, and I know it doesn't seem like it, and people usually laugh when I say this, I am an extreme introvert. Like extreme. Like I am nourished by solitude. I am in my happy place when I am working and writing. But, I, over the years, have had to kind of connect to that extrovert self. So, I mean, for everybody, introverts and extroverts, it's kind of like, it's a spectrum, of course. We're not all, I'm not an introvert to the extent that I can't connect and don't want to connect to people. And during the pandemic, I realized that I maybe not as much of an introvert as I thought I was. Like I was like, well, I'm not this much of an introvert.
I want to
like
get out of the house.
that's right, exactly. And I have like all these, friends that, are part of the industry, authors, everything, and we are just very much take it for granted that we can see each other, at conferences and book signings and everything, all, throughout the year all over the country. And then all of a sudden when that got sort of taken away, like I was like, oh, wow, maybe I'm not that much of an introvert, but I am. And yet, I have this extroverted side as well, because you have to kind of tune into that. So I have found, like, I read a book called Introvert Power. And it, in that book, I learned that it's really all about energy, right? It's about balancing your energy. So it's like, if you are an introvert and you mainly honor your introvert self, like when you feel those introverted tendencies coming on and you can honor them and you do honor them, then when you have to be your extrovert self, you have more energy to do that. Yeah. So that's kind of how I try to balance it. Like, I try to, especially during book tour, I'm either 100% on, like now, hi, or I'm 100% off, like I'm in my pajamas with an eye mask on,
like a robot, like she's
right,
completely
like
powered down.
Totally
when she
powered
walks out,
down.
she's powered down. Do not ask her any questions,
like,
okay? I will
I'm
give
like
you an
an
opportunity
iPhone,
to ask
I gotta
questions.
plug
That's it.
in with my dog and
It's
and then I'm like, okay, I'm back to full power. I'm out. So that's kind of how it works.
Yeah. So especially as you're going on tour, I mean, it's really it's must be then slightly daunting as you're looking at the calendar, because I'm guessing that the industry doesn't want to build in a lot of like, hey, Scottsdale wind down days so that Lisa can refresh, recharge. Then when we fly her first class to her next stop, she'll have like 2 days to shore up the reserves and then go to her events.
No, that is not book tour.
That's not how it is.
That is not book tour. It is a flight every morning and an event every night. And that's just kind of how it goes. And this time I went home in the middle because I have an elderly Labradoodle. So I wanted him to just come home for 2 days and then go. He has a happy place that he loves to be, but I just wanted him to come home, and then came back out on the road this week. So yeah, but it's and it's all sort of it's kind of like a thing. And so this is my 22nd novel, and so I've been doing this most years for 22 years. So you kind of you kind of slip into the zone. You're just like, I've got this, and you have your little routines and how you do things, and certain things, like, yes, it's silly that I'm staying an hour away from the store, but also I took a really long hike today. So as soon as I left my house at 4 a.m., we're here by 10:30, I guess, Arizona time, and I was able to just kind of go out and walk and be in Arizona. So that's the kind of thing that nourishes me and gives me the energy that I need on the road.
And who knows, that trail may be in your next book.
I mean, right? That's what happens.
Did you come across any bodies today while you're hiking?
Not today.
Oh,
no,
well,
not today.
Tomorrow, if you have a little time before that flight,
if I'm lucky.
Okay, so she already mentioned 22 books.
Yes.
You're on all of the lists. She's a New York Times bestseller, international bestseller, 2 Edgar nominations. For those of us who are not writers, tell us which of the awards that is most comparable to, that we might be familiar with.
The Edgar or the Thriller award? I don't know. I mean, I know they call it the Oscars. They call it the Oscars of the mystery world. I don't know if that's really true. And I was only nominated. I didn't actually.
That nomination is forever.
No, and it is,
double,
and it's
2.
meaningful. It's huge. It's huge. But I always do feel like I need to qualify. I just yes, but it is. It's a very to be nominated.
To be nominated is an honor.
It is an honor,
and also a painful memory.
No, and exactly. And Harlan Coben was like, just think about all the people who have lost the Edgar, all the people who didn't win the Oscar. It's a really illustrious list of people who didn't win. Anyway, next time.
Well, you had 2 nominations.
That's
right.
2 nominations.
So I think my math would say 2 nominations equals
in a
1
single
win.
In a single year, right?
Wow,
I mean, that's a lot. That's a lot. Okay,
It is a lot.
It is.
You could create your own prize.
Exactly.
It's a gigantic thing for the person who gets the 2
I'm gonna
in 1
make
year.
make my own. Yeah.
So your schedule for the year is you are writing efforting to write one book a year now? Is that kind of where you're
Yeah.
at? And at what season does a new idea spark? Is it all, I mean, obviously there's contracts and deadlines and people
Sure.
with money involved, but
Right.
organically, how did it start to pattern out for you?
Yeah, I mean, so I started my first novel when I was 19 years old, when I was still in college. And it took me 10 years to write my first book because I was like, still in college and I just like didn't have the confidence to pursue it and I had a big job. And then once I did get published, it was pretty much like a book a year from that point. So from 2002. And for me, I've been writing since I was a kid. I don't remember a time before I defined myself as a writer. And so in a lot of ways, it's harder for me not to write than it is for me to write. So I've never, other than when my daughter was small and then everything is like, everything's just mayhem, of course. But like, it's always been kind of a comfortable pace for me. So, there's always like for example, like for this book, or my next book, my 2026 book is already done. So I turned that in and it's already done. I am right now at work on the 2027 book. So that's kind of how it works. And
I feel so unaccomplished.
No.
Do you not? Yes, right? Like, what are we doing? Here we are just reading.
Yeah, just
proud of ourselves.
No, don't diminish that. That is like everything. Thank you for reading.
Books as she wrote.
That's right.
That's crazy.
So like for example, and it always was like kind of a collision of ideas for me, and like sometimes something kicks around in my head for years or even decades, and sometimes it's like kind of an immediate like, oh my god, I have to write about this. And so in this case, for Close Your Eyes and Count to 10, this is actually was inspired by something that happened to me on one of my travels. My family and I went to the Azores, which is like a beautiful archipelago in the Atlantic, Portuguese islands. And it was our first trip like after the pandemic. Like it was the first time like we had left the country in years. And so we went to this island and it's just like these, has anybody been there? Has anybody been to the Azores? It's like this completely like these gorgeous volcanic islands. It's like, think of like a combination of Hawaii and Iceland, right? So it's super dramatic, very fecund, absolutely like, it could be completely blue skies one minute and then like a storm the next minute, just very like, it's like a little bit sleepy. It hasn't been overly commercialized. It's just gorgeous. And so we were hiking the rim of a volcanic lake, or we were heading out to hike the rim of a volcanic lake, because this is like the kind of thing that we do. I don't know why. And so we were heading around and this big storm blew in and we were sent like kind of racing back to our rental car. And we were like, okay, great. Like, who really wants to hike anyway, right? So we were heading back to our hotel and we came across this abandoned structure. And we would later learn it was a hotel that was built in the 1980s. And it had gone bankrupt like within 5 years. Like it started in debt and just never, was able to sustain itself. And it just fell to seed. Like, so it's just been sitting there, like basically crumbling since the 80s. And it was like, a complete ruin. It was like everything was been looted out of it. The windows were all gone. It was like just this giant black, monolith coming out of the green. And, it's surrounded by signs like na entra, and like that's Portuguese for, don't enter, peligra, like in any language, stay away. But I was like, well, they don't mean me, right? So of course we had to pull over. I had my daughter with me, so like maybe it wasn't my finest parenting hour, but as the daughter of a thriller writer, she's used to like sort of semi-safe excursions. So we all decided we were going into this hotel to see what was there, and it was just absolutely amazing. It was like covered with graffiti, and like the foliage had just sort of like started to take the structure back, so there was all this like stuff dripping off of interior balconies and trees coming up out of the concrete. And there was like an elevator shaft with no elevator, and like, every fixture had been stripped and the wind was like whipping through. And I was like, oh my God, of course I'm going to write about this. Right. I love, this is the best place I've ever seen.
Why would they want to keep tourists
Like,
away
my
from this
God,
thing?
like this is amazing. Exactly. So so that was kind of like a love at first sight setting moment. And then it kind of dovetailed with another like sort of obsession that I've had for a while. And this is and I always have some kind of obsession going. Like I always have something on my mind, something that I'm researching, something that I'm super annoyed about or angry about or like wanting to know more about. And like this is just my personality. Like I'm just kind of a research junkie. And for this particular book, what I was really thinking about at the time was like YouTube celebrity. Like the concept of like, my daughter, is 19 now, but like, she was, of that age where like all these like sort of, big personalities were making it big on YouTube, and they had all these followers and they were doing all these stunts, and, there was all this like just sort of this idea of like, they're famous for something that as a person of my generation, you're just kind of like, I don't get it. Like, what are we doing here? Like, and I would watch stuff with her because, we just always did everything together. And she was always really interested in these games of hide and seek, these extreme hide and seek. They'll be like in an abandoned hospital or like a haunted house or something like that. And they're all very like, she would be so engaged with it. But it was all obviously completely staged, right? Because like, I mean, I'm sorry, if there's a camera on you, you're not hiding. Like that's it. But like she didn't see it that way, like at all. She's like, oh my God, jump scare. I'm like, no, not really. So like and that generational difference was like very interesting to me. So I'm always like kind of obsessed about technology, right? And like Confessions on the 745, it was about like the privacy that we give up in social media. And Last Girl Ghosted was about online dating. And Secluded Cabin, Sleep 6 was about like the Airbnb culture, like how we just go online and like book these houses and then go and stay there. Like
and are willing to share our DNA.
Yeah, right. Yes.
DNA
testing.
Sets
Don't
that plot.
like
It's
we're not even gonna.
like, Merry Christmas.
We can't even
DNA test.
Yeah,
now
Merry
what's gonna
Christmas.
happen?
Guess
Murder.
what? Like the chances are very high that you're gonna learn something that you cannot unlearn. Very high. But so it's not like the technology that interests me, but it's the way the technology is rewriting the way we relate to each other.
So,
and so
this hit for me exactly in the right time period because my life is, I also just have one child. He's going to be 13 in April.
Oh boy, you're in the middle of it.
So, I mean, it's just, So everything he relays with any enthusiasm,
Right.
and you don't want to shut him down as a human being, but it's like, that's not interesting.
Right, because you're looking at it and you can't even like understand it. You're like,
tell me something real. Like,
exactly.
give me the gossip about someone at
that's
school.
Right.
And then I can point at them and be like, that's the one I
Who's
want to be able
dating?
to see them in real life.
Right, exactly.
And then we watched they just had a big Mr. Beast
yes
game show thing
right.
that was like 5 million. I still don't understand how this guy is so wealthy, where the money comes from. So he was like a maverick. So it was, I just had to watch every single episode, and he's giving away more money than any game show had ever given away in the history of shows.
Yeah.
And it started with thousands of contestants, and it goes down to. And so these people are very prevalent in my life.
Yes,
right now,
exactly. They're like,
it was great.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I mean, it was like that personality. So like Maverick Dillon, who is like he runs extreme games and insane challenges, and he is the person who, with his company, is staging this hide and seek competition on the island in an abandoned hotel. See how all this works, how it all fits together. Yeah. So and my other main character, Adele, is a single mom. And when I first started, seeing her, hearing her on the page, she was in the principal's office with her son. Her son is being bullied. He's just had his glasses shattered. And Adele is kind of like, she has been through trauma. She and her children have been through trauma. Her husband left them. He embezzled millions of dollars from his company. He left Adele and their children with nothing. And so she's like clawing her way towards like sort of a new light, right? And so she, like, when we first meet her, she's in the principal's office and her son's been bullied, his glasses have been broken, and all she can think of is like, I don't have the money to fix these glasses. I don't know how I'm going to fix his glasses. And so that's like her sort of thing in the moment. And she's in this principle in his life is like so intact. It's like his pictures of his family and his awards. And she starts the book feeling just like really like less than, like kind of really broken, and like, how am I coming, how am I moving forward? So when by the end of that first chapter, I realized that she too was kind of an influencer, that she had kind of clawed her way back from this bad place. She got herself in shape. She started doing all these like kind of tough mutter competition sort of things. In my book, it's tough biatch. and my YouTube is We Watch. So usually they happen on the beach.
Instagram is
yeah. Photogram. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I don't like to follow anybody else's rules. Like, I want to make up all the rules. It's like a little bit of a God complex. So she has her channel, and she's like gotten herself into shape, and she's like helping other people who have been, broken by their circumstances, get strong, get in shape, start, living a different life. And so that's where she is. And she's kind of like in her garage gym that she's built for herself. And she's like taking out her frustrations on the heavy bag, and she's like filming it for her followers. She turns it off. And then Blake comes down, cause he's feeling bad too, that, his glasses are broken. He knows like how hard she's struggling. And he's like, Mom, guess what? Maverick Dillon, who is like his obsession, his like YouTube's obsession, he's hosting a game of extreme hide and seek in an abandoned hotel on an island, and the prize is $1 million. All you have to do is go there and hide and not get found.
That's all you have to do.
That's all you have to do, Mom. And she's like, huh. And so for whatever reason, she's just desperate. She's desperate. She thinks that if she has this $1 million, then that's going to secure the future for her and her children. And her kids are old enough to kind of like stay on their own for the first time. Her older daughter Violet and her younger son Grant, they're teenagers. And so she decides that she's going to the island. She applies. She's accepted. She's going to play this game for the $1 million prize.
And I love the conflict internally about like, okay, why would you do this? Would you say
Can
yes?
I do
It's
it?
a ridiculous idea. I mean,
Right.
you're young.
I'm
your
a
son
mom.
Your
Right.
son is saying this. She's got all these responsibilities, but then at the same time, she really needs a shakeup in her own life, and she also wants to show them that
yes.
she is persevering through a really huge challenge,
Right.
and is able to sort of become a hero in
Yes.
their lives, and even in a space that is so important to him.
Right, exactly. And like she has that she has that idea that she can, be the person who is not a disappointment to them. Like, this is a thing that she can do, and she's been doing these competitions, and she's very just focused on what this would mean for her children. Like, it's a big enough motivator for her that she's willing to just kind of take this next step. And even though, she's deeply conflicted about it.
Well, and of course, because of technology and because these are people who are living their lives on camera, in essence, her kids are going to be able to watch all of the goings on from the moment she gets to
Live
this
stream.
exotic locale and
That's
everything that goes wrong. And they're going to, and it's sort of a great experiment in the way that they sort of become the parents for her, in that they've got to watch her and track her and worry about her.
Right.
Which is, of course, the roles are usually reversed.
Right. And Blake has his whole like command center set up. He's following everybody who's there, the other competitors. He's
very tough online.
Yeah, and he's very tough online. He's bullied in the real world, but online he's a little bit of a badass. And he's watching the weather, and of course, that is sort of like the big thing. Another big theme in the book is that, people have come from all over the world. There's Malinka. She's the youngest woman to have climbed the 7 summits. There's Wild Cody. He's kind of like on a redemption circuit. And they are, they've come for this game, and they've all come for the prize, and they've all come for different reasons, even beyond that. But then a storm sweeps in. And all of a sudden the stakes are no longer, am I going to win $1 million? The stakes are, can I survive this challenge?
And there's also the an interesting little element as the story is getting prepped and she's making a decision about, okay, well, I know this Maverick guy because I share in this with my son all the time, and I nod along and go along as he's talking about these people. But something's itching at her.
Yeah.
She knows there's something that has gone wrong with this guy, and that's also kind of contributing to her apprehension about taking part in this game.
Yeah. So there was a mishap, a problem on a previous extreme hide and seek, and a young woman hid and was never found, and she's still missing. And a lot of people suspect Maverick, and they suspect the extreme team of being involved and not cooperating with the investigation. There's been all kinds of sightings all over the country and the world of Chloe who's gone, and so there's a big question mark about where she is, what happened to her. And there's a story about her connection to Maverick and, Maverick's behavior around the world, which is less than stellar.
Less than video perfect.
That's right.
And just note to real life readers, if someone has gone and participated in an activity and one of them never came home, it's not the best thing to recommend for your beloved relative.
Yeah, you shouldn't maybe do that. Just like in real life, you shouldn't do that. But in fiction, you really should do it.
It's great, yeah.
Because
real life, let's do a few more rounds where everybody survives.
That's right.
Okay, they dialed it in. I'm good.
In fiction, when you can't go, you know what? That's not safe. I'm going to go home. In fiction, you have to go. That's not safe. I'm going in there. I mean, that's what I did in IRL as well in the Azores. Yeah.
Exactly. Okay, so character-wise, I assume it was Adele that this began with, but I could also just as easily see it beginning with her son Blake, or even with
Angeline. Yeah. I mean, I really, honestly, the first voice I heard, I mean, I already had Adele. I had like an essence of her, but the first voice I heard was Maverick. Now, Maverick is he's an interesting character. He's layered. I always approach all my characters with a lot of empathy, like with a lot of love, because otherwise, if I didn't love them on some level, even if they are, deranged or twisted or addicted, or in his case, maybe just an egomaniac, among other things, like all the best people, I have to have some kind of feeling for that character, even if other people are like, oh, I hated him. I'm like, thank you. That's great, because I can see why you did, but I didn't hate him. I was very interested in him because, again, it goes back to that piece about technology and how it's rewriting us. I had to ask the question about him, okay, here's a person who has lived his entire life in front of the camera since he was a child. He was his mother's first subject. She's a photographer. And he starts off doing all these sort of stunts when he's a kid. And then he becomes a gamer, and he's one of those YouTube gamers who's playing the game and helping other people play the game. And then he starts this company where he and his friends, his guy friends, they travel around the world and do all these stunts. And, they're just, kind of whatever, heli skiing and shark cage diving and all of that, and doing all of the things that these kinds of guys do, right? So that kind of personality is always very interesting to me, that adrenaline junkie person, because it's so completely opposite from me. I like to think of myself sort of as a comfort junkie, it's thread counts and spa treatments that really thrill me. That's where my big thrills come in. But this kind of personality, this person who's willing to just do anything for a high, for a thrill, for that adrenaline high, that was really interesting to me. And then also the fact that he's only lived for the camera. And then you can see him in the book as well. We have an interior life with Maverick, but we also see his broadcasts, his live broadcasts on We Watch. And he is somebody different in both, he's somebody different on camera than he is internally, than he is with Angeline. He's just a different person from every perspective that we see him from. And then we also see him from the perspective of the other characters and what they bring to that personality. So, I was really interested in kind of approaching him from all of those different angles and trying to understand what else is there? Is it just what you see, or is there somebody else? And or has he just spent so much time performing himself that he doesn't even know who he is?
Without that reflection or without the comments and the compulsive reading of the comments and actually happy even when they're hateful comments.
Right.
Just it's better than nobody watching.
Right. It's attention. Like I hate you is better than nothing. Yeah, exactly.
This summer we were on vacation and we sat down at a lunch and my son was like, I'm like, what's happening? He's like, and it was one of the guys from Dude Perfect, which is like they do the things and the shots and the thing, and he's the one that went to space and all the stuff. But I have no idea.
I know this is actually I don't even know who they are. See, my daughter went to college, so I'm not up on the YouTuber of the moment.
Yeah, I think this has been a few years. It was just like he was like, I mean, literally in his mind the most famous person in the world.
Right.
Sat down next to him for lunch, and he was just
right. And you're like, I don't know who that is.
Yeah,
like at all.
I was like, I gotta.
Right,
my
exactly.
son thinks you're somebody very
That's right.
important.
Like he's
dying.
very excited
and
about
he was
it.
the nicest person, and basically he said, when I meet kids, I just really try to tell them like. It was a real anomaly when we did this, and like you really can't make a life as a YouTuber, so you should totally have something else.
Totally think about something else.
In a really positive way.
We still need like doctors,
exactly.
And lawyers
and
like
YouTube about that medical
that's
stuff
right.
all day long.
Exactly,
totally,
exactly,
right?
exactly,
yeah.
exactly.
You can share the law and your legal expertise on YouTube all the time.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So as you are thinking about, and I know you mentioned some of we're talking about like modern technology and sort of the moment ways that people are communicating or connecting with each other or disconnecting. It does seem like you have a really great gift for finding topics or finding environments that are topical, which I think is really, readers, especially who love this genre, read a lot of books.
Right.
But there are certain elements that can make things feel very fresh or very relevant.
Right. Yeah, and I think that it's interesting because I feel like we're all sort of writing, apart from each other, like authors, right? Like nobody's like comparing notes, right? But we're all consuming the same stuff. We're all watching the same things. We're reading the same things. We're watching the same news. We live in the same world. And I think novelists, in a certain way, are like, we're tied into the ether. We're taking, stuff, vibes, energies. We're picking it up, and and so a lot of times you'll find like your book comes out and it's like, oh, there's another book set on an island, or this is like something that is like a trend or whatever.
You all love cabins.
Well, yeah, I mean, come on, what's not to love? I mean, like a cabin in the woods. I mean, we're not the first. It's not a new idea. Right, I mean, it's like back to Grimm, right? Like Grimm fairy tales. So, I mean, like it's just kind of like there are all these like iconic symbols. But I think what's interesting is that every single one of us brings something new to it, right? Like we all have, you could have a book that was like, even in the same location or the same setting, or even it's like the same general vibe, like it's in a competition or whatever. But everybody brings their own thing to it. Makes it fresh. And so like, I don't, like my stuff comes from, I'm a very like organic writer. I don't make a lot of intellectual decisions, right? Like I don't like.
That doesn't sound right.
No,
I don't believe that.
No, it's true. Like there's no like, okay, I want to write a book about this, right? It's like, oh, I'm going to write a book about this because I want to think about this or whatever. It's more like, as I described it, like, there's something that I'm obsessed with. There's something that I'm researching. There's usually something like maybe, something that happens or something, it connects to something deeper that's going on with me. And then I start to hear a voice or voices, and the story evolves for me on the page very much in the way it will for my reader when they read the book. Like I write for the same reason that I read, because I want to know what's going to happen to the people living in my head. And I have written every single book that way. So it's not like I'm not making like the kind of choices like, oh, people are writing about this, so I want to write about this, or this is working, so I'm going to write about that. Like I can't operate that way. I just can't.
And you literally, when you're sitting down and beginning something, you don't know. Who's going to make it in the end?
No, I don't know who's going to show up. I don't know what they're going to do day to day. I definitely don't know how the book is going to end. If I did, I wouldn't be able to write it, because why?
So does that mean that you never experience writer's block? And would you say that if you were working within the style of outlining and you want to get over there, that you'd be more likely to encounter an obstacle to get you there because you're obligated to go there?
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine having an outline because it would be kind of like my intellectual brain telling my, subconscious what to do. And I would just be like, well, how dare you? Like, why would you tell me what to do? Like, even though it was me. Uh, or or some part of me. So like I just can't I can't imagine working that way, but I do think of writing as an organic process. And so like all organic process, there's an ebb and a flow. So there are days where you can't stop the pages from coming and you're just in the zone and it's just flowing. And then there are days when it's not. There are days when you're like sitting in front of the computer and you're like, all right,
time to rearrange the office.
No idea what's going to happen here. And that's a moment that you have to kind of honor, because that's like when things are kind of percolating. You don't have the next thing yet. It's okay. You can do certain things. You can do sit-ups. You can go to the gym. You can throw the ball for the dog. You could bake a cake. You could do some laundry. You cannot go on social media. You cannot answer email. You cannot do anything else that masquerades as work, because it'll immediately shift you out of your creative brain and into your dopamine seeking brain. And once you're in the dopamine seeking brain, then you are not going back to the creative brain that day. So you have to be really disciplined about that, right?
So what do you, I guess then in theory, the creative parts of yourself you've been able to protect and develop to be as receptive and to translate what you're receiving into art. For those people who struggle with that, what would you say would be a good practice to kind of try to, a lot of times people will think even like, oh, I remember when I was a little kid and I was really good at making up stories, or I trusted myself to do this. I was creative in this way. And then as adults, maybe just because of distraction or self-consciousness or limitations that we, for whatever reason, have actually encountered or put on ourselves, we stop trusting
being creative.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really interesting. I think that, the first thing is that like if you have that creative desire, if you have that desire to write, it means something. If you have the desire to paint or to create music or to dance or whatever, if you have that like belly of fire for something, then it's important. It means something. I don't know what it means to you or what it means to the world, but it means something. And so if it's important to you and it's something that brings you joy, then the only way to sort of get there or get to that space is to set a time where you devote yourself to that thing. I mean, it's like anything you want to do. If you wanted to get in shape, you'd hire a trainer and you make an appointment with that trainer and you'd meet that trainer there and you wouldn't miss it, because it's important, because you paid somebody else to do it. However, you set a time for yourself to write or to paint or whatever, and you wind up on social media, Facebook stalking your ex or watching funny cat videos. The truth is you just didn't care enough to work on your novel or to start painting. And so like you create the schedule and then you honor the schedule, and there's no like magical muse. Like there is creativity, there is a magic to it. There is something that even I, after 22 books, don't completely understand and don't have access to. But I will tell you that if you discipline yourself to set a schedule and you meet yourself there, you will be surprised at how often creativity comes to you during that time.
I mean, we've touched on it a little bit.
The device
draw of the device and kind of generationally how much it's changed everybody. But it does, if you're out someplace and everybody is like this.
Yes.
How many amazing creative ideas were swirling around those people that they just didn't notice because
100%.
They were incapable of sitting and kind of
being bored.
Yeah.
Yeah. Boredom is the seed of creativity, right? Like that is, and this is, I talk about creativity a lot. I talk about it to kids. I talk about it, to corporations. Like boredom, we have all learned to just be terrified of being bored. Like, God forbid we should sit there with 5 empty minutes, right? Like, without picking up your phone and looking at your phone. But that's where everything lives. That's where all the creativity, every story, every great idea that changed the world came from a blank space, came from a place where somebody was just like, huh. Right. I mean, but like, we're all losing that. And, I always tell my aspiring writers, in addition to that, in addition to scheduling your time and finding a space where you can just be creative, it's also, pick up your notebook instead of your phone. And I'm guilty of it as anybody else. I mean, it's like it's in your hand. Like, somehow they got us all to carry the thing in our hand like all day long, pressing it constantly, looking for something that is definitely not there at all. Right. So, like, why do we're just all, they've really done a number. So,
And when I'm charging my phone in another room, and I will do this for big chunks of time, people are very annoyed and they don't believe it's true. They think that you're just ignoring them or whatever. It's like, no, I just keep it in another room. Like, it's not
you have to, you have to keep it, in another room sometime, because any presence in the room is a distraction.
Obviously, you are a wildly successful professional author. I mean, awards and best-selling books and all of this. But if Lisa Unger's books were not published and out in the world and being consumed by readers, would you still enjoy the process?
Oh, yeah.
And which part of the process overall is the highlight? Like, which is the best? Is it finishing the first draft, coming up with the first idea, seeing a character come to fruition, or is it seeing your baby out in the world?
All of that stuff is great. All of it is amazing. But I have to say that, I am a natural writer. I've been writing since I was a kid. There is no greater joy, other than my family. There's no greater joy for me than the blank page. It is a portal into the universe, right? And I am always in joy and in awe that I get to sit down and every day and try to be a better writer than I was yesterday. Like, that is the thing. Like, awards, bestseller lists, all that, it's all great. It's all, it's all motivating in its way. But there's nothing as deeply and intrinsically motivating as the idea that I know every day I am going to write and every day I'm going to try to get better. And that for me is everything. Like, the writing, the character, the exploration of human nature, that trying to answer questions that I have. Like, it's pure joy for me.
And I love the idea that everywhere you go and every experience you have is research for your next book.
Absolutely.
So are you able to write off just about everywhere you go for your taxes?
Absolutely.
That's amazing.
You never know what's going to come up.
Yeah. I mean, think about it. The possibilities of just that aspect of your career
I know.
alone
It's amazing.
is incredible. Wow. There is a new phase for one of your books that we mentioned earlier that's going to be headed to Hulu, right?
Yes.
Share a little update on
Yeah.
this,
So
please.
Confessions on the 745 was optioned by Jessica Alba. And originally it was at Netflix, and then we had the writer's strike and the actor strikes, and we lost Netflix. And I kind of thought, that's it. It's not going to happen, because this happens a lot. You have the option and it just kind of expires and doesn't go anywhere. Jessica Alba was like, nope, we're going to keep going. They wound up placing it at Hulu. We have Eva Longoria to direct, Charisse Castro-Smith to write, and we have a pilot. Written pilot, and approval to write more episodes. And the pace is absolutely it's glacial. I can't believe how long this project is taking. But we do seem to be moving in the right direction. It's all very exciting. We have a lot of passionate, excited people on the project. And hopefully, at some point in the not too distant future, you will see it on your television.
That's
I hope.
exciting.
I hope. Yeah.
And it's an interesting phase of your craft, because then you kind of have to let go, right?
You do have to let go. And and it's I always just kind of think, though, and I know some people get very sort of tied up in it, but I honestly feel like the novel belongs to me, and it will always belong to me. It's mine. And then my novel inspired somebody else to create something, and that thing is necessarily going to be different from what I created. And so like when I read the pilot, I think a lot of people get very like stressed when they're like, I don't like it. I really loved it. It wasn't the same as what I wrote. I mean, it wasn't certainly like I didn't look at it and be like, oh, that's exactly as I had had arranged it on the page. But like I could see where she drew from the book to create a more visual first episode. And I was like, okay, that's so interesting. So like I felt very like kind of, I was impressed and excited. And also I felt like it was really cool that something that I wrote inspired somebody else to create like this new version of it. But I feel like the book is always mine, and that whatever winds up on the screen will mostly belong to somebody else. Yeah.
But it'll get people to go to the store and buy more of your books.
Of course, I hope. That's
right.
right.
That's all.
Based on the novel by Lisa Unger. That's all. That's right. That's all you need.
Exactly. Okay, if you were doing something else, if the world said you're not allowed to be a writer, what would you be?
I would be an abnormal psychiatrist. Oh. Yeah, that's.
I thought you were just an abnormal person or a.
Well, yeah, that too. Well, I'm already really abnormal, so yeah, no, I would definitely be in psychiatry or psychology for sure.
That makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you're curious.
Yeah, that's my deepest That's my deepest curiosity. That's pretty much what drives every book. Is my curiosity about people.
When you see a story about somebody doing something awful, are you able to look at that person in the context of the event from a writer's perspective and say, well, I'm curious what made this.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always curious about people. I'm always curious about what makes somebody a monster, what makes somebody a hero. I'm curious about, identity and family and secrets and, how we hurt and help each other. I'm just curious about, pretty much every aspect of human nature. Like it's not like a direct one-to-one. Like I'm not going to, necessarily read about a crime and be inspired to write about that crime. But there might be some piece of that or some piece of that person that comes forward and winds up in a book. So it's not like a direct, like, oh, I'm, this criminal interests me and I want to write about him. Like it's not really direct. I'm going to go visit them. Like I don't have any of that. Like I don't want to go sit in a cell with somebody. I just don't.
Yeah,
I just don't.
This is much better.
I also, I'm very interested in, as much as I'm interested in that type of personality and I do a lot of research about it, I'm mostly interested in, the person that is victimized in a certain circumstance, but who is not a victim. Somebody who has experienced trauma, but is finding their way on the other side. And that's the kind of personality that interests me the most. And I think a lot of my books center around that person.
And I think most readers, that's the kind of character that we want to get behind and follow through the course of experience. And that's Adele.
Absolutely. 100%. Yeah. She's like she's got that kind of metal that really interests me.
So Adele's tough. You said that you enjoy the comfortable life. Comforts, coziness, comforts, relaxation,
blankies,
nice
stuff. Things like that. Yeah.
So, perfect place, perfect day, perfect meal. Where would you be? Both vacation to just like optimal relaxation, creativity zone, and
home.
Okay.
I mean,
which is Florida.
Yes, it's Florida, but that's not what I mean. I mean my house, the house that I have created with my husband and my daughter and my dog, our home. Like that's my ideal like space to be. But also, I will say that we're watching White Lotus.
Oh,
yeah. And I'm thinking that Four Seasons in Thailand, I'm thinking like I think I might have to find myself there.
Definitely. Good sheets for sure.
Right, but also like the whole kind of therapy part of it and like the treatments and like the metaphysical stuff, all of that. Like I could see myself spending like, I don't know, like 6 to 8 weeks. And so that's kind of like my fantasy situation. It's kind of like, how, I mean, it's kind of like rehab, but like without the rehab, right? Like
Yeah.
just kind of like get yourself like your energy tuned up or something, like some Reiki and whatnot. Yeah, like
You
that.
put your phone in a bag.
That's right.
All that
Exactly.
nature,
Take it, put it in the bag.
and so much massage.
Exactly.
Just perfect.
So that's kind of like my fantasy scenario.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll see you
It
there.
wouldn't be like a bunch. Yeah, let's go.
Yes, that sounds amazing. Do we have any questions for her, Lisa? I know we do.
Oh, you guys are not shy.
Christina.
Hi.
Okay, so 22 books later,
Yeah.
how has your writing evolved from when you first started?
Yeah, I mean, I hope my first book, as I said, I started when I was 19, and the one I just finished in January,
Older than 19.
Yeah, 54. So I hope it's I hope it's like, I mean, I hope that if you read the full body of work, that you could see me in every stage of my life throughout that work, right? That there's a thread that you could follow through. I hope as a writer, I'm, way better now than I was at the age of 19. My process hasn't changed in that I've always written motivated by character voice. It's just changed that now it's my job. I'm not writing in the nooks and crannies of my life, which was true at first. Like I would write on the train. I would write, in the morning before I had to go to work, or I would write at night when I got home. So I was always like trying to fit it in. And then at the early part of my career, when I was still doing other work, when I was still doing public relations writing and all of that, which is what was my job in publishing before I became a published writer. So then it was like, and slowly as I became a full-time novelist, now it's every day. It's my work day. And so that's how that part of the process has changed. But, the love for it has not changed. The, just the desire to dwell in those fictional worlds and with the characters, like that has never changed. And I just hope, I hope I'm getting better. I hope I just keep getting better.
And Christina is one book out into the world and has her second one with the publisher.
Congratulations.
Yes.
Congratulations.
So you only have 20 more to catch up
That's
with Lisa.
It's not a race. It's not a race.
So lots more to come.
That's right.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
I've got a question about the business side.
Sure.
Writing.
Yeah.
So when you described your writing style as organic,
Yeah.
what if your organic story is going to be 2,000 pages? And you've got a publisher that won't publish 2,000
Yeah.
pages.
Yeah.
How do you work through that tension or that dynamic?
Well, I've never had a manuscript that was 2,000 pages, so that helps, right, to start with. But this is the kind of interesting thing about me.
What? How many pages?
I mean, I'm usually coming in about 100,000 words, right?
Okay.
So it's like about 400. It's about 400 pages. So that's I've been so I say I've been a writer all my life. I never defined myself as anything else. But before that, I was a reader. My mom was a librarian. And, story has been kind of a big part of my life. So my dad, who just recently passed, he was an engineer in trade and in spirit. And he didn't like any fiction. And so my mom was a huge lover of fiction and movies and plays and, and we had a house full of novels and nonfiction books all the time. And so I've just been reading and reading and reading forever, right? Classic literature, popular fiction, nonfiction. There was no censorship in my house. I was a really advanced early reader. I was allowed to read anything that I could reach. And so I feel like to some degree, I basically just internalized the form of the novel. And my brain knows how to tell a story in that arc. And it just is something that is not natural to me, but it's just something that I've been studying since I was a little kid. And so for me, there isn't that I'm writing and writing and writing and the story never ends. That just doesn't happen. I have an idea and I have like a vague essence of what the book is going to be about. And in the writing of it, I think I'm so tuned into the form of the novel that I kind of instinctively know how it needs to kind of unfold. I do write long for, like when I reach my first draft, it's probably about, maybe between 90 and 100,000 words. And then the second draft is probably 105. And at the end of the day, I probably come in at 110. So I'm always like writing more. Like I'm not generally cutting from that first draft. But like the first draft for me, like that's just for me. I write that story just for me. And then the second draft is where I try to make sure everybody else gets to come along for the ride. And then when I turn it into my agent and my editor, that's like the best that I can do. It is the literal pinnacle of my ability. I can't do any better. I'm turning it over. Help. Help with this. And then in the editorial process, it goes from being the best that I could do to the best that it can be. And so it's a long process. It's a process of a year of writing, and there's a lot of editorial work and all that stuff. But like, I have that sense, the sense of like what the core of the book is, and I write around that core. Yep.
Are there still recommendations and changes that are made at your editor's recommendation that surprise you, that you're like, oh wow, this is so much better, or how did I not automatically do that or that?
Well, yeah, I mean, you'd be surprised at how collaborative it actually is, like at the end of the day. But like, at this stage of my career, like if I hear a great idea, I know it. I'm like, oh yeah, that's great. I need to, or like, oh, this didn't work, or oh, that didn't work. Okay, well, why didn't it work? Maybe it's not the thing that didn't work. It's the thing underneath the thing that didn't work. So I have to do that detective work. If if you trust your editor, and I do, then you know that she wants the book to be the best that it can be. And my agent as well always has good notes and stuff. So a good idea when you hear it. And if there's a resistance to a change, or maybe there's a reason for that, but you want to figure out like if something's not working, why it didn't work. So yeah, it's a big part of the process.
I love that collaborative mindset when the time is right.
When the time is right.
Not when she's still. You had a question, right?
Thank you. Yeah, I love that.
I thought I was the only one that felt that way. I don't know how you do it, but it's really interesting.
That's awesome. Thank you. That means a lot. That means a lot. And I do feel like, I heard Meryl Streep interviewed about her role in The Iron Lady, and she was asked like how she could so inhabit a character that was not her, that was not like her. And she said that she believed within every person is the seed of every other person. And I really believe that, I believe that. And, so I approach everything with empathy. I approach every novel with the idea that, we're all the same. Like under the skin, we're all the same. We have our secondary differences, but, really at the end of the day, we are one. And so, when I walk into every story that way, so I hope that's why you're taking away a piece for yourself from every book. Thank you.
I have a question or two from the online.
Okay.
We got one way back there. Okay. A question has come in from Sue. She says, I just lost it.
Sorry, Sue.
Okay. Hey, Sue. Yeah, she asks, Blake and Violet are opposites. Which one do you relate to more?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. There's little pieces of them each that I felt very tender towards. Like I love about Violet that she's, she's like very tough, right? She's like angry. She's like quick to get, quick to defend, quick to just sort of be really like sort of, rough with her brother and, kind of ragey, but like it's just her surface, right, that protects this like very like sort of, her heart's broken, and Violet and Blake I think is like, he is like a gentle giant, but I think that he has like the same metal that Adele has. He just hasn't quite, well, he does, in his way discover it within the book. So like that was the piece of him that I love. But I feel like, I mean, like every character has a little, like maybe a little tiny piece of me, but their own self. Yeah.
And it's a good, as you're looking at the two, you're reminded of even when they're young and obviously they're teens, but how much they know
Right.
and how much your kids observe and try to fix and maneuver
Yeah.
based on your needs
Exactly.
or your vulnerabilities.
That's so true.
And knowing that mom might be crying at night, but not wanting her to
Right.
know that because that would be
shameful
for her.
Shameful.
And
Exactly.
so
Yes.
it's changing your behavior, and so it's those dynamics that are so relatable
fascinating.
And so,
Yeah.
so potent.
Yeah. Thank you.
Have any of your friends appeared in your books?
Well, I think a lot of people think that they have been in my books, like, and people who have been in my books, like, don't think that they've been in my books. And sometimes there have been problems, and people think that the people, no, that's, people think they see themselves in my books, and then I always just think, God, that's so arrogant, that you would think that you were in my book. Like, don't you know that it's all about me? And so, yeah, I mean, it's like, it's so not any of, it's like, there's so like nothing, like no character is exactly anyone, but there might be pieces of everyone somewhere in my body of work. So
what about the names?
Oh, they come with their own, people come with their own names.
Okay.
Yeah, people come with their own names, and like even like sometimes in editorial you wind up having to change a name. Like once I had to change a name for legal reasons, and then once like it was just too similar to another name. It like just became very complicated. So I wound up having to change a character name, and like that's really hard because it's like not their name, and like I'll never think of them as anything but the name that they came with. So it's really it's challenging.
Wow.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Oh yeah, they just kind of come. They just come with their own names. They. I mean, it's like, how did you get your name? Your mom gave it to you. Like if I meet you, you say, "Hi, my name is X," and that's kind of the way I experience my characters. Like I feel like they already have their name. Like there's no. I mean, I know some people are like, look at baby books and do all that kind of. But I've never done that. And like they've just always like I've already just kind of. If they're in there, they've got their name. If they're already like living in there.
And one thing I wonder, especially at the pace with which you're writing, when are you able to read? And do you have like a paranoia about too much of that story coming into your own? Are you obviously you love being with other thriller writers? I know you do the conventions, and it's a community, and I would love to like just be a fly on the wall at these things. It sounds amazing. But how do you work all of that stuff out?
Yeah, I mean, we're just readers. We're all readers first, I mean, and the reading brain is completely different from the writing brain. Like it's there's nothing similar about those two brains, right? And so I don't ever worry about being like overly influenced by somebody else's story. Like I mean, I think we're all influenced by each other. We all read each other. We're all influenced by everything that we've read. All writers are influenced by the authors that they've been reading all their lives. Like that's just that's where you fall in love with story, like in the pages of somebody else's book, right? So I never really think about it as being like, worried that like I'm, not going to be an authentic writer because I read so much. But I do read a lot. I have a lot of friends who are amazing authors. I read a lot for blurbs. I read a lot for pleasure. I read a lot of nonfiction. Because it really informs my fiction. So I do have a reading life. It's a little bit of a occupational hazard, there's so much time spent writing and researching and all that like a lot of times you don't have as much time to read like the thing that you actually will like want to read. And I actually was on stage with Laura Lippman a couple of years ago in I think we were in Cleveland. And she said that she had just kind of stopped blurbing because she was getting so much stuff. She was constantly reading something that she was being asked to read. Not that she didn't want to read it, but just that it was something that she kind of felt a professional obligation to read. And that she said that she realized that she needed to protect her life as a reader, because it's such an integral part of your life as a writer. And so after I had that conversation with her, I realized, like, very much so in that moment, that I had not been protecting my reader life. And so I've been very much more focused on just making sure I'm reading the things that I want to be reading.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Because that's the love.
That's that's how you recharge your writer's batteries, right? Like, that's how you recharge.
You are your mother's daughter. Your
That's
mother's
right.
A librarian.
That's
You have
right.
to-
Absolutely. You got to read those
read the
books.
book
You
that
got to
is
have all the
speaking to
books.
you.
That's right. Exactly.
And as a mom who, my son will not be a librarian, that is most certainly one thing I can say as a fact. What advice do you have for incorporating, besides having books around and showing that you love them yourself? Is there anything that you saw, her effectively do in the library, or talk about kids who were maybe resistant readers?
Yeah, I mean, I first of all, read to your kid every single day. Like, if you can, read every single day. Let them see you reading, right? Like, that's important, that they know that you're in love with books, and always make sure that there's stuff that's available to them that they actually want to read. And that could be graphic novels. That could be, something that you don't necessarily think is interesting, but if they want to read it, let them read it, right? Don't say, oh, don't read that, it's not up to your level. Don't read that. That's garbage. Whatever. Let them read what they want to read.
Biography of fill-in-the-blank YouTuber.
That's right.
Mostly
Biography
pictures.
of Mr. Beast. That's right.
Great. I'm good.
Whatever. Just read it. If you're reading it, read it. Great.
Well, thank you so much for letting me join in your conversation.
Thank you for being here. You're
and,
amazing. You're wonderful.
congratulations.
Thank you.
Wow.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. Thank you.
We're going on an adventure.
Yes. Thank you.
Signing up here. right?
Absolutely. Up here? I might stand
Did Barbara leave?
to sign.
Oh, well,
I think she said she was gonna at some point go.
Gotcha.
I don't know
Yeah.
if she went already.
Well, most of you know the drill. If you could just fold up your chair and put it against that wall, and you should have numbers in your books. If we can line up by number.
That's manual labor time.
That's right.
I think I'm out of. I don't have a Sharpie. Yeah, I think I left them in the back. Do you think this goes up? Oh, there it is.
Lisa, Olivia can vouch for me. I'm not like a crazy stalker or whatever.
Well,
But I'm gonna. Well, I don't know if she can vouch for it. But I'm gonna take a bunch of pictures.
Yeah.
And I've already taken some, so I'm gonna move these
Okay,
so that
sure.
they look cool and you can see your book instead
Okay,
of.
great, perfect.